So next week, we are finally gonna get the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. We're gonna see what this thing's gonna cost. We're gonna get all the details we wanted to get back in January. Got really nothing. But what else are we gonna see? We're gonna see some games probably, but I see a lot of people on the internet right now talking about how this is going to be a gigantic blowout and there's going to be so many games and all this stuff. And I think we need to talk realistically about what could be at this Direct. I think there will be a lot, but I think some people need to pump the brakes just a little bit. What's up, guys? Welcome back, or welcome in for the first time. Do me a favor, jump down to the description of this video. There's a link over there to our podcast channel. We do a podcast live every Wednesday night over there. Also, check the link down there to the Discord. We're in there all the time. We do game nights now. We're gonna have another one probably this coming weekend. So if you wanna be involved in that, join down below. Let's jump right into this. I wanna start out with what is probably going to be the focus of this Direct. Obviously, we are getting a new system. That is going to be what they focus on the most, I would imagine. I see so many people talking about how there's gonna be so many games, and I do think there are gonna be games, but first and foremost, they need to tell us about the system. That's what the most important message that they need to get out to us is. It's about the system. So as far as things we'll probably see there, obviously they're gonna tell us what this thing can do as far as things like the mouse functionality. We're gonna see that more in depth, I'm sure. That's probably going to be a big part of this. We already know how the Switch switches. They don't really need to take a ton of time on showing us how it goes in the dock and how the Joy-Cons come off, except for the fact that they do come off in a different way. They will probably explain that a little bit, but I don't see them going into detail about how it works or if it's magnets or whatever it is. I don't think they're actually going to tell us that specifically. I think they're just going to show us that it works differently, leave it at that. And I think that's going to be a big theme in this entire Direct, is they're not going to really dive into like specs. They're not going to give us details on all these things. It's just going to be a basic understanding of how it works so we can understand what it is when we get it in our hands. And there's a few more points on that I want to make later when we talk about some more things about the specs and what's going to be involved in the Switch 2. But one thing I do hope we see, and I do hope they actually take some time on and maybe even address the fact that it was a big shortcoming when it comes to the old Switch, is the UI and the different apps we can get from the eShop. Things like Netflix, Disney Plus, regular apps that are on literally everything else and not the Switch. I know for the Switch 1, they really wanted to make sure that the focus was on gaming. They didn't want to confuse people and think, you know, oh, this is just a tablet that has controllers connected. We're over that now. We are on to the next phase of this. I think they can start introducing those things and not confuse people, considering how well the Switch sold, how many people already have one, and the people who don't have one, they also understand what this is too. It's a fairly normal thing to see a Nintendo Switch out anywhere and know what it is, even if you don't have one. So I think that is something that they should probably focus on a little bit, just letting people know like, hey, we are gonna put these apps on there that weren't available there previously. For me, I would really like that, especially in a Switch 2, something that's gonna support maybe 4K on a TV. I probably wouldn't use those apps in handheld, but to be able to just put docks in my, living room, bedroom, wherever else I want to have all that stuff, and be able to use just one Switch tablet to move from room to room wherever I'm at to watch all my content, no matter what I'm doing it on, if it's YouTube, Disney Plus, Netflix, HBO Max, whatever it is, it would be really nice to be able to do that on a Switch and be able to do it, in higher quality than 1080p, 4K, like everything else does at this point. I really hope we see that. That's probably one of my biggest wants as far as things we don't know. Obviously, an updated UI. We're gonna see something different. It looks like it's based off of the old one, but I'm sure it's gonna be much better. There's got to be more involved in the UI this time. I think they are gonna show a lot of that stuff. I hope they take a little bit of time on all those things and at least give us that. So other things we haven't seen yet, but we've seen some patents for, and there's obviously going to be one because we have a new system coming, is the new controller. I'm sure that the Pro Controller will probably work on the Switch 2, but I don't think they're just not going to have a new version of the Pro Controller in some way for the Switch 2. Even if it's close to the same with an extra button. There's been patents where it looks like something comes apart and you can use the mouse function with the two pieces of the controller. I don't know if that's gonna be the way they go. Maybe that'll be something they introduce later or not at all, but that is probably something we'll see. I would imagine they'd show that there. We didn't see it in the initial trailer, which I think they actually did show the Pro Controller in the first trailer for the Switch 1. I'm pretty sure they did show that then. We didn't get anything in that teaser that we got, so they'll definitely show that. I think we're gonna also obviously know when we're gonna be able to pre-order this thing. They did announce that at the big Switch 1 blowout. They announced it was gonna be able to be pre-ordered in a few days from when it was. So that is something you're definitely gonna wanna be ready for. When we get into next week, who knows, they may have it ready to pre-order that day, later that day, maybe even the next day, maybe that weekend. I would say you're definitely gonna wanna start getting ready for a pre-order soon, because it looks like this thing's probably going to be coming out in June, maybe May. I think May might be a little bit too early, but people are talking about May. June seems like a reasonable time for this thing to come out. They do say they're gonna have plenty of stock, so hopefully scalpers aren't an issue. I don't think they will be. It sounds like they've been shipping Switch units to the United States since like January. So if they've already got that much stock coming in, like since, just from then till now, the amount that they would be able to get into the country is probably a lot. All the reports are saying this is gonna be a huge launch. So I think they actually are prepared for this. They have been talking about how they're gonna fight scalping. So stock is the way to do that. So get ready for that pre-order. It's probably going to be announced at the Direct, probably towards the end, along with the price. My guess on that, it's going to be $400. We don't know. It could be $450. It could be $350. Probably not going to be $350. So get ready for that. A few other things I do want to talk about is the upscaling and all the other stuff that we've been hearing about the Switch 2. Now, if this was an Xbox presentation or PlayStation, anybody else but Nintendo, I would say, yeah, we're gonna hear all about, what makes this thing run, maybe how it works, what we should be expecting out of the screen, but this is Nintendo. They don't really do that. I think with the Wii U, they did acknowledge that it was an HD system, coming from the Wii. They kind of had to, because everything else was HD at that point. They did have to say that. So there may be some mention of 4K. There may be some mention of what it will output in handheld and docked, but they are not going to get into detail. I really, really doubt about any of the upscaling if that's happening. The DLSS stuff, I don't think any of that is even going to be mentioned. I think a lot more of that stuff might be later on when people get their hands on it, or maybe something from NVIDIA themselves, maybe on the website, like the Nintendo website, they may go into some detail about what it is, or at least what's in there, and then people can kind of break it down from there. But this is Nintendo. They're not going to go into the weeds with specs and deep dives on stuff like that. That's not what they do. They really just give you enough information to understand what it is, what it does, basically give you an idea of what you can expect from it, what you can get out of it, without going into detail on actual specs. This is a family company at the end of the day. They really don't want to confuse people, especially after the confusing marketing with the Wii U. They stayed away from a lot of that stuff and trying to overcomplicate things with the Switch. I think they're going to stick to that with the Switch 2. So the other thing I do want to talk about with this event is the games. Now, there was a time, maybe a few weeks ago, I was really starting to think, like, is there even going to be games at this Direct? This is focused on the Switch 2. It is a Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. And I know the word Direct usually means, yeah, we're gonna get games. We're gonna see the system. Yeah, it's a Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. They're just gonna have it all there, which they probably will have some games. I think they are gonna have some games. I went back and looked at the Switch 1 launch, which was completely different. That's another thing that we really have to stop and talk about here. The Switch 1 launch was a live event, a stage event. It was not a Direct. They have moved this to a Direct style, which I think is probably a good idea. They're gonna be able to have things a little more streamlined and put together. So everything is gonna be exactly the way they want. There's no room for error. That's probably a good idea, but this is gonna be different. There is a possibility, and there's rumors, which I don't think this is happening. There's rumors of a Direct this week. The week before, the Switch 2 Direct. I don't think that's happening, but I could see a world where we get a Direct after this. Maybe a week after, a few weeks after, to really highlight more of the games. I could be totally wrong about that. But who knows? This could be just about the console itself. When it's coming out, we could get like maybe some flashes of games, and then that's it. I don't think so. I did look back at the Switch 1 presentation. They did have some games there. I kind of forgot about how they did that format. So I went back and looked. They did have some games there, but they had strategic games there. And I think they're gonna go pretty close to what they did there with this one. One thing I will say I think we are definitely gonna see is a new IP from Nintendo. They gave us ARMS at the Switch 1 event. They gave us ARMS. I think we're probably gonna see a new IP. I think that's a really good time when you're putting out a console, a brand new thing. It's a really good time to put out a new IP and at least try it out, see if it worked. Splatoon worked. ARMS, it was fine. It didn't really light the world on fire like Splatoon did, but I'm sure they're gonna give it another try. What it could be, I have no idea. So I think we'll see something like that. The thing that I'm really having trouble trying to figure out is what the launch games are going to be for this system. Now, I know we have seen some of Metroid Prime 4, not a lot at all. We've got one basic gameplay trailer. That's really all we've seen of it. I don't know if they're just going to put that game out as a launch title for the Switch 2. I don't see that selling systems. Yes, I mean, the Metroid franchise is getting bigger, but it's not Mario, it's not Zelda, it's not gonna move systems in that way. So even if it is a launch title, I think there's going to be another one. My guess is the Mario Kart game that we've already seen. But then I also think about this. We haven't seen anything of that game at all. We haven't seen anything of a 3D Mario. We haven't seen really anything. We don't know what any of the games for the Switch 2 are going to be, other than maybe Pokemon, probably Metroid Prime 4, a few others here and there, but we don't have a lot of information on any of that stuff. So my question is, are they going to show us games at this and then put this thing out, I don't know, 2 months later, a month later, with just that window for marketing for a brand new Mario game? That seems a little weird to me. That's not really a Nintendo move. They haven't really done that with giant games. They've done it with some games, you know, remakes or stuff they've ported from the Wii U, smaller titles, but they really haven't done releases that quick. So I'm really struggling to try to figure out what they're gonna do as far as a launch game. Mario Kart 9 or whatever it's gonna be called might be the game to go with. You know, Mario Kart 8 had such success, and just throwing another Mario Kart out there, you know, that's a game that's gonna sell no matter what. It's gonna sell for the entire life of the Switch 2. I don't know if it'll be Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sales, but it's definitely gonna sell. Everybody can play Mario Kart. That's the great thing about it. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe kind of gave you even more options with that, with different control schemes for younger kids. So you don't even really have to do anything. So Mario Kart 9 would be a good bet for a launch title. But as far as having a crazy amount of games there, I just don't see that happening. I think first party wise, we may see 4, 5, maybe 6, but think about the launch lineup for the Switch. We had Breath of the Wild, but we already heard so much about Breath of the Wild. We already knew so much about it before they told us the date that it was coming out, the day of the Switch. We don't have that game right now. We don't have any game like that where we know a lot of information about, or at least some, enough to say, yeah, it's coming out in a month, 2 months. So I really don't know what they're gonna do there. The other games we had at launch, we had Snipper Clips, which isn't a big game. That's a small game. It's not like, that's not a Metroid Prime level game. It's not a Mario Kart level game. It's not a 3D Mario. It's not a Zelda level game. We also had 1-2 Switch, which was basically the tech demo that probably should have been included in the box with the Switch, but wasn't. We'll probably get another game like that, but I don't think we're gonna get a ton of giant games at launch. I think we'll see some of the stuff they plan to put out for the year, but I don't think it's gonna be the huge blowout that everyone is expecting. Third party wise, I think it's gonna be more of a sizzle reel. We may get some information on key partners. My guess is one of those is gonna be Microsoft. We may see things like the new Doom, Elden Ring, games like that, bigger games that are already out, things that could come on the launch date. But I just don't see a lot of first party stuff really being at this. Maybe 4 or 5 games. I think they're really gonna focus on the hardware. They're gonna give us an idea, but I think they're gonna set most of this stuff up even more in a direct sometime after. That makes more sense. That's basically what they did with the Switch 1. So for anybody out there really excited about seeing crazy amounts of first party games, I would definitely take a step back from that, because I don't think we're gonna see that. We are gonna see a lot of stuff, don't get me wrong. I'm really excited for this. We're gonna see a ton of stuff. I just don't think it's going to be what some people are making it out to be online. But I could be wrong. We've seen them do things with the Switch 2 already that Nintendo's never done, in the name alone. Calling it a Switch 2. We've never seen Nintendo really do a direct sequel to a console with a number like that. So, you know, there's new people in charge everywhere at Nintendo. This is their first launch. I've been talking about this a long time over on the podcast with Jeeve about how this is going to be something probably a lot different than we've seen from Nintendo, just for that fact. We've got new people in place. We see it already, so I could be wrong. This could be a gigantic blowout with tons of games, hour-and-a-half long. They could deep dive into the specs and how the DLSS works. I don't think that's gonna go that way, but I could be wrong. As far as the other first party games, I think maybe that 4K Breath of the Wild game, if we don't get the other thing that I'm gonna talk about in a second, that 4K Breath of the Wild thing that we heard about, in, what, 2023 that was being shown off behind closed doors. Maybe that's something they do at launch. Or maybe, since we don't have this giant lead up to market a new game, maybe we do get Mario Kart 9. Maybe that's the launch game. And they tell us that all of our Switch 1 games are going to be, as we know, backwards compatible. Maybe they all have updates, or maybe a big list of them have visual updates. You know, they're gonna have better frame rate. They're gonna be, you know, 1080, handheld, 4K, whatever. Maybe that's something that we see that they start to push a little bit more with the backwards compatibility. Maybe that's something that's included for Switch Online. Maybe it's just included for everybody. Maybe it's not something they hide behind a paywall. Maybe it's an upgrade, you know, $10 for the upgraded version of Breath of the Wild if you already own it. Something like that. There's lots of paths they could take with that, but that is something I'm actually very interested in. I hope they really do that. There's been some patents showing, you know, 540p stuff being upscaled to 1080. I mean, a lot of old Switch games ran handheld around 540, unfortunately. So this could be something that we see them do and make the Switch 1 library more of a focus going forward, being upgraded. You know, the backwards compatibility is one thing, but to have them 1080 handheld, 4K, running 60 frames per second, or whatever they might be, upgraded versions of these games would be a pretty big selling point for not only people who have a Switch 1, but for people who missed out on the Switch 1 and that giant library. Just, you know, going ahead and picking up a Switch 2 and being able to play all those games, but upgraded, that's a pretty big selling point, I think. So we'll see next week. We'll see on the 2nd. I'm really excited to see that. After that happens, I am going to New York on the 5th to hold the Switch 2. I get to play it. I'm gonna make a video on that. I will have it out the following week as fast as possible. So if you want to check that out, make sure you're subscribed. We've only got a week left. We are in the trenches now. I'm really, really excited to see what happens with the Switch 2, everything going forward with the games. It's gonna be a fun ride, but that's gonna do it for this one, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. Please leave a like. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll see you in the next one.